My name is Nathaniel Gray. I was an ordinary man once, living an ordinary life in a small, unremarkable town. My days were filled with mundane routines: work, meals, sleep, and the occasional social outing. But that was before the incident. It began on a brisk autumn evening. The air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot as I walked home from my office job. The sky was a tapestry of reds and golds, the kind that made you feel grateful to be alive. Took a shortcut through an alleyway, a path I had taken countless times before. This time, however, something was different. As I walked, I noticed a faint, pulsating light emanating from behind a large dumpster. Curiosity piqued. I approached the source. There, lying in a small pool of blood, was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. It was small, about the size of a large rat, with skin that seemed to shift colors like an oil slick. Its eyes, large and luminescent, fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I should have turned and run. Instead, I knelt down, my hand reaching out involuntarily. The creature moved faster than I thought possible, latching onto my hand with a sudden, agonizing bite. Screamed and tried to shake it off, but it held fast, its tiny body writhing as if trying to burrow into my flesh. In a frantic moment of clarity, I managed to fling the creature against the alley wall. It let out a high-pitched screech before falling silent. Blood dripped from my hand, the wound throbbing with an unnatural heat. I stumbled home, my vision blurring, the world around me fading into darkness. When I awoke the next morning, the wound had already begun to fester. My skin around the bite was a mottled purple, veins bulging and pulsing unnaturally. I felt a deep, bone-aching pain spreading from my hand, crawling up my arm and into my chest. Tried to go about my day as usual, but the pain was all-consuming. By the third day, my entire arm was swollen, the skin stretched tight and discolored. I couldn't hide it any longer. Went to the hospital, but the doctors were baffled. They'd ran tests, poked and prodded, but could offer no explanation. I was given painkillers and sent home, my condition worsening by the hour. The first real transformation occurred a week after the bite. I was lying in bed, drenched in sweat, when I felt a searing pain in my chest. I screamed as my skin began to ripple and tear. Something was moving inside me, pushing against my ribs, trying to break free. With a sickening crack, my ribcage split open, and I watched in horror as a long, spindly appendage forced its way out. I passed out from the pain, waking hours later to find my chest partially healed, the appendage now retracted but still visible beneath my skin. I was changing, my body no longer my own. Days turned into weeks, and my condition continued to deteriorate. More appendages sprouted, each one tearing through my flesh with excruciating pain. My skin became a patchwork of scars and unnatural growths. I could feel my bones shifting, my muscles tearing and reforming in ways that defied nature. I became a recluse, hiding from the world as my body transformed into something monstrous. I stopped going to work, stopped answering calls from concerned friends and family. I couldn't let anyone see me like this. The pain was constant, a relentless agony that drove me to the brink of madness. One night, in a fit of desperation, I returned to the alley where it all began. The creature was gone, but I hoped to find some clue, some way to reverse what had been done to me. Instead, I found only darkness and silence. As I stood there, a strange sensation washed over me. The alley seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, the same energy I had felt in the presence of the creature. It was then that I heard a voice, soft and whispering, coming from within my own mind. It spoke of ancient powers, of a cosmic force beyond human understanding. The creature, it seemed, was a harbinger, a vessel of this force. By biting me, it had transferred a fragment of its essence into my body, initiating the transformation. I was becoming something more than human, something beyond the physical realm. But with this transformation came a price. My body was merely a vessel, and it was breaking under the strain. I realized that I would not survive this metamorphosis. The creature's essence was consuming me, using my flesh as a conduit for its own rebirth. As the weeks passed, my mind began to unravel. The pain was unbearable, my body a twisted mass of bone and flesh. I could no longer recognize myself in the mirror. My eyes, once a deep blue, were now a sickly yellow, my skin a grotesque tapestry of scars and protrusions. The voice grew stronger, guiding me, urging me to embrace my new form. It spoke of a greater purpose, a destiny that lay beyond my comprehension. I fought against it, clinging to the last vestiges of my humanity. But the transformation was inevitable. On the final night, as the moon hung low in the sky, I felt a surge of energy unlike anything before. My body convulsed, bones snapping and reforming, flesh tearing and mending. I screamed, a guttural sound that echoed through the empty house. With a final agonizing rip, my skin split open, and I emerged from my own body, a creature of nightmarish proportions. I was no longer Nathaniel Gray. I was something else entirely. Being of pure, unbridled power. We are but fleeting shadows in a vast, uncaring universe. I was once like you, ordinary and unremarkable. But now, I am a harbinger, vessel of an ancient force that seeks to reshape the world in its image. It all started with a pair of clown shoes. Back when I was just a young man in my early 20s, I lived in a cramped apartment in a rundown neighborhood. My roommate, Dave, was a horror movie aficionado. I wasn't. In fact, I detested anything remotely scary. But Dave had a twisted sense of humor and loved playing pranks on me. I should have seen it coming when he brought home those ridiculous, oversized clown shoes one evening. "Look what I found at the thrift store," Dave exclaimed, holding up the battered polka-dotted shoes like a trophy. "Aren't they great?" "They're hideous," I replied, shuddering at the sight of them. "You're just jealous because you don't have a sense of humor," he teased, wiggling his eyebrows mischievously. "I'm going to use these for my new horror comedy project." Dave was an aspiring filmmaker, always cooking up some bizarre idea or another. His latest obsession was blending horror with comedy, a genre I found confusing at best. How could something be funny and terrifying at the same time? "Whatever, man. Just keep them away from me," I said, turning back to my book. I should have known that was the beginning of the end. A week later, Dave's twisted sense of humor took a darker turn. It was a Friday night, and we had a few friends over for drinks. The night was filled with laughter, stories, and enough beer to drown a small village. Around midnight, when everyone was sufficiently buzzed, Dave decided to play his prank. "Hey, Matt," Dave called out to me from the living room. "What's up?" I responded, stumbling slightly as I made my way towards him. "I have a surprise for you. Close your eyes." Reluctantly, I closed my eyes. I heard some shuffling, a few muffled giggles from our friends, and then Dave's voice again. "Okay, open them." I opened my eyes to see Dave standing in front of me, wearing a full clown costume complete with a painted face, a red nose, and, of course, the giant clown shoes. He let out a maniacal laugh, and our friends burst into drunken applause. "Haha, very funny," I said, my heart pounding a little too hard for my liking. "You look ridiculous." "Oh, come on, Matt. It's just a joke," Dave said, his painted grin stretching from ear to ear. "You should lighten up." But there was something about those shoes, something unsettling. They seemed to stare at me, mocking me, as if they held some dark secret. That night, after everyone had left, and Dave had crashed into his bed still in full clown regalia, I couldn't sleep. The clown shoes haunted my thoughts. I kept seeing their garish colors and oversized shape in my mind's eye. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just the beer and the lingering adrenaline from the prank. Around 3 a.m., I heard it. Faint squeaking noise coming from the living room. My heart skipped a beat. I told myself it was just Dave, sleepwalking or something, but the noise continued, growing louder and more insistent. Squeak, squeak, squeak. I got out of bed and tiptoed to the living room. There in the dim light, saw them, the clown shoes. They were moving on their own, slowly shuffling across the floor with that maddening squeak. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. What the hell? I whispered to myself. The shoes stopped abruptly, as if they had sensed my presence. I stood there, staring at them, willing them to move again, but they remained still, lifeless. After a few minutes, I convinced myself I had imagined it. I must have been half asleep, my mind playing tricks on me. Turned to go back to my room when I heard a soft giggle. Whipped around, but the living room was empty, just the shoes, sitting innocently on the floor. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and growing paranoia. Kept hearing the squeaking noise at odd hours, catching glimpses of the shoes moving out of the corner of my eye. Dave, blissfully unaware, continued his life as usual, editing his film and planning new pranks. Dave, we need to get rid of those shoes, I told him one morning over breakfast. Why? They're hilarious, he replied, chomping on his cereal. They're creepy. I swear, they move on their own. Dave burst out laughing. You're kidding, right? Come on, Matt. It's just a pair of shoes. I'm serious, man. There's something wrong with them. Fine. If it bothers you that much, I'll put them in the closet. Happy. It wasn't much, but it was a small relief. Dave stuffed the clown shoes into the closet, and for a brief moment, I felt a sense of peace, but it didn't last. One night, I woke up to the sound of loud banging. It was coming from the closet. My heart raced as I approached the door. The banging grew more intense, shaking the walls. I reached for the doorknob with a trembling hand and swung the door open. The clown shoes flew out, hitting me square in the chest and knocking me to the floor. They landed with a thud and immediately started moving, dragging themselves across the carpet towards me. I scrambled back, my mind racing with terror. Dave, wake up! I screamed. Dave stumbled out of his room, rubbing his eyes. What's going on? The shoes. They're... I pointed to the shoes, but they had stopped moving, lying innocently on the floor once more. You're losing it, man, Dave said, shaking his head. It's just a pair of shoes. No, they were moving. They attacked me. Maybe you need some sleep. You've been acting weird lately. I wanted to argue, but I knew it was pointless. Dave wouldn't believe me. I was on my own. Determined to end this nightmare, I decided to get rid of the shoes myself. The next day, while Dave was out, I grabbed a garbage bag and stuffed the clown shoes inside. They felt unnaturally heavy, as if they were resisting. Tied the bag shut and drove to the nearest dump. As I threw the bag into the trash compactor, heard a faint, high-pitched laugh. I didn't look back. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. I woke up feeling refreshed, confident that the nightmare was over. But it wasn't. 2 days later, Dave came home with a sheepish grin. Hey, I found something in the alley behind our building. You'll never guess what it is. My stomach dropped as he pulled out the clown shoes, looking as pristine as ever. Where did you get those? I demanded. They were just lying there. Can you believe it? Thought someone had stolen them or something. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Dave, you need to get rid of those. Now. Oh, come on, Matt. It's just a pair of shoes. You're overreacting. No, I'm not. That night, I heard the squeaking again. I lay in bed, paralyzed with fear as the sound grew closer and closer. Suddenly, my bedroom door creaked open. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. The clown shoes stood in the doorway, moving of their own accord. They stepped into the room, one deliberate squeak at a time. Scrambled out of bed, grabbing the nearest object, a lamp, and hurled it at them. The shoes dodged effortlessly, their red noses seeming to mock me. Dave, help! Shouted, but there was no response. The shoes advanced, their pace quickening. I backed into the corner, my mind racing for a way out. In a desperate move, I lunged at the shoes, grabbing them with both hands. They felt cold, almost slimy, and they struggled against my grip. With every ounce of strength, I wrestled the shoes to the window and threw them out. They hit the pavement below with a sickening thud. Collapsed to the floor, panting as Dave burst into the room. "What's going on?" he demanded. "The shoes, I threw them out." I gasped. Dave looked at me like I was crazy. "Matt, you really need help." The next morning, the shoes were gone. I don't know what happened to them, and I don't care. All I know is that they never returned.